a little boy got up and played How Great Thou Art. And I was weeping because that little boy's family came into church about 7 or 8 years ago. His mom was abandoned as a child and grew up, raised her and her brother by herself. Her brother killed a little boy in a gang initiation and was in prison for 17 years. And she was a drug dealer for all of her life until her daughter came to a church service and invited her mom to church. And she is now a full-time staff member at our church. And her brother greets every Sunday and holds the door open for people and is an usher. And so we say we want revival. We say we want to win the lost, but are you okay with a murderer opening the door for you on a Sunday or a drug dealer working at your church?
Welcome, everyone. Today we are blessed to be joined by T'Neil Walea. She and her husband pastor First Church in Pearland, Texas, and she helps run their yearly Motion Conference. Along with all of that, T'Neil works full-time for Microsoft in the tech industry. We had a great conversation about her life and ministry, how Motion Conference came to be and why it is such an invaluable event, what we need to know about AI in the church, her tips for finding balance, and much more. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hey, it's good to be here. Nice to meet you and to be on your podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome having you on. We've been, as we were just talking about pre-recording, we've been admirers of First Church and of you and your husband for a number of years, and so grateful that you agreed to come on and share your wealth of knowledge. I was trying to put the brief together about what we were going to talk about today, and I was just like, okay, cut that, because we just don't have enough time to cover everything. But so grateful that you would come on and be on the podcast here today.
Absolutely. My honor. It's great talking with you.
Well, I like to start all these conversations by getting to know the guests, just so for the audience, if they don't know you or don't know much about you. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your story, just to give us a bit of context of where you're coming from today.
Thank you. My name is T'Neil Walea, and I live in Houston, Texas. My husband and I pastor First Church in Pearland, which is South Houston. And we have 3 children, an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old. Both of those are girls. And then we started all over with a 2-year-old little boy. So our worlds are total chaos. But we pastor full time, obviously, and absolutely have the greatest church that loves their community, loves serving, loves focusing outward. And it's such an honor to get to work with them every day. And we truly do life together. So it's a wonderful thing. I grew up here in Houston. My dad is pastored previous. He's the senior pastor at First Church. So Ken and Tessie Gurley are my parents, and they've pastored here for 35 years. And then Tyler and I got elected in 5 years ago, and pastor a great thriving church that loves reaching out, loves helping others. And it's such an honor to do life with them. And so we're part of the UPC, and we do a lot of events. We go to a lot of things, and we enjoy being a part of such a great organization. And we have found our people here in Houston. We have found those that we really truly do life with. Those in our church that have similar interests, similar lives, and similar states of family dynamics and stuff. And so live a wonderful life. I also work full time for Microsoft, so that's a kind of a nuance that's a little bit odd in the church world. But we have a great life and an exciting one, and dinner conversations are always very fun and very random, right? So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I love that you just casually throw in that you work full time for Microsoft along with pastoring, as you do.
What do you do? How do you casually? How else do you bring that up?
Yeah, exactly.
It just kind of comes out. It's like that also.
Yeah. And we'll talk about a little bit later about some of your insight when it comes to balancing different things. But first, I wanted to talk to you about, so you mentioned that your father, Brother King Gurley, he's the pastor of, or was a senior pastor of First Church for a number of years. And then obviously you and your husband have followed along the line to take over the church. When did you first feel the call to ministry growing up in a pastor's home? I'm assuming you were steeped in it, obviously, from
Yeah.
day dot. But when did you first feel the call for yourself and started walking in that direction?
All right. So I'm just going to be really honest. I don't know that I ever felt that. I think that if you are saved, you are called to ministry. And I kind of view it as it is my reasonable service to be in full-time devoted ministry, whether I get paid for it or not. I love being First Church's #1 volunteer. I think the mindset of calling, I think if we are saved, we are called to be a light and to be in ministry. I think everything in your life is ministry. I think the job you have, the career you have, I view ministry very differently because I was the one girl, the one pastor's kid who did not know how to sing and play. And it was kind of like the MO, like, what else can I do if I can't sing and play? And I took like 8 years of piano lessons and voice lessons, and it just never really took. And so, growing up, I felt like I really didn't have a place in ministry because I couldn't do those things. And it was through the open doors that I walked that I realized that God calls all of us to ministry. And the will of God is that you do the work of God wherever you're at. And so whether you are a professional, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, whether you're in full-time ministry, I think the job of believers is to be in ministry. So did I have this great aha moment and this like angels come down and sing to me and call me into ministry? No, I didn't. I came into ministry because I felt vastly underqualified for ministry because I couldn't do the things that my peers did. And so I was devastated at the thought of being left out of ministry. And I started praying, God, just use me, whatever that looks like. I can't do what everybody else does, but I'm really good at a computer. Can you use me? And that's how I grew up. And so it was always I was always envious of those people that had these like great angel moments. I didn't have that. I saved you, and so I've called you. And my calling may look totally different than anybody else's, but I think that's part of it. I think we are each called to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ in the life that we live. So as far as when I felt my calling, I don't know that I ever felt my calling. I feel like all I wanted to do from the time I was aware until now was find a way to give back to the Savior who died for me and how I can be a light in a dark world, whatever road I take. And so, yes, I grew up in the ministry, but, my brother is a tax attorney. I am I don't know what, a director at Microsoft, and my sister was a teacher at a school, and so she's currently a stay-at-home mom with her beautiful little babies. But all three of us would say we're in ministry, but don't get paid by a church to be in ministry. So it's a little bit different culture, I guess, in our house. We're all called and feel like we all have a job to do.
So is that standard sort of set by your father? Because I think I've heard him say, so I forget what conference he was speaking at, but he was talking about how that, is it right that nobody at First Church is full-time? That they've all got some sort of part-time job?
Few of us. So we have a great, thriving church. There are probably 5 full-time staff members.
Wow.
Most of them all have other jobs and other sources of income. And the mindset behind that is, I remember when I was a teenager and I told my dad, that, I really wanted to attend Bible college mainly because it looked really fun, and I wanted to have fun. And so he said, "That's fine, but you've got to go to University of Houston first." And I was like, weak. And so his mindset for all of us, my dad was a certified public accountant before he was in the ministry. And so it was kind of very much the norm in our house that my parents were full-time ministry, but my dad is a licensed accountant. My mom is a general contractor. My brother's the tax attorney. My sister-in-law's a designer. We just all have other jobs. And so the way we choose to do ministry is I meet a whole lot of people by working a secular job that nobody would ever meet and nobody would ever get to share the gospel with, because I'm willing to step out of the bubble of what could be my life. And so at First Church, most everybody, even that is on staff, has other jobs and other sources of income, because that gets us out in the world and that gets us exposed to people that need God.
Yeah, awesome. So what advice off the back of, you said you sort of just followed the open doors as they opened. What advice would you give someone who is wanting to do more for God? They feel like, they're saved, they're coming to church, but they want to start moving in the direction of being more involved in ministry. What sort of advice would you give them?
I think I think we have stereotyped what ministry is for a very long time as a movement. And I think what ministry is being the hands and feet of Jesus wherever you're at. And I think so oftentimes we feel like, well, if I can't preach on Sunday or sing the solo, then I'm not involved in ministry. And God never gives you a talent or a gifting that is not meant to give back to him. So if you've got a skill set or a talent that is not being utilized in the church, you need to find a way to make that happen and find a way to utilize your ministry. I mean, for me, the irony of the fact that I now work at Microsoft is not lost. And I mean, it's probably even serendipitous, because for 25 years, every single Sunday, my calling has been to sit behind a computer and make all the graphics and PowerPoints for that Sunday sermon. And so before I ever came to work at Microsoft, which I'll get really emotional about if I go down too far, I had given that talent to God for 5,000 PowerPoints before I ever got paid to do it, and got paid to work for the company. And I think as far as ministry, I think ministry is what you feel God has called you to do. And that doesn't look the same for anybody. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the same as the stereotype you have in your mind of what it's going to be. But like for me personally, well, I didn't speak publicly at church. I knew I had that calling. Like I knew eventually that was going to play out. But before I ever spoke on a platform, I had run media behind a camera for 20 years. And, it's just like, I see this big push of, I feel called to the ministry. Well, but what are you doing right now? Ministry is what you do every single day. Ministry is your life. Ministry is an overflow of your relationship with God and how you choose to direct it into a way that says, look, God, I'll do the job that nobody even knows that I do it. I mean, nobody even, who knows who makes the graphics and who makes the PowerPoints, inserts the scripture. Nobody cares about that stuff. Nobody comes and pats you on the back. But for 20 years, I served behind a computer before God said, okay, I can trust you with the small things. Let's try and move you into something else. And so, if you're willing to sacrifice your pride and your ego to get involved into ministry, find a way to take the talents that God has given you. I was really good at a computer. And so something that I could do for the church that they didn't have to pay somebody to do was that I could volunteer my time to make all the graphics and make all the PowerPoints. And that was a gifting that, is it spiritual? Not for most people. For me, absolutely. It is a calling. It is a sacrifice. I mean, getting ready with 3 kids on a Sunday morning and then going and making all the graphics, because, God doesn't speak to pastors until like right before church. Just throwing. I'm just talking trash because my husband's leaving. So the concept of God, of coming to church and being willing to do stuff that nobody even knows you do. Nobody praises you for it. That's a whole lot of what ministry is. And ministry is doing the 99.9 things that people never see. And then the 0.1% of the maybe 1 hour on Sunday that you speak. And as far as getting involved in ministry, if you feel called to ministry and you feel like there's something more you can do, ask God to reveal your perfect 10, what it is that you are really good at that perhaps isn't being done in the church, or perhaps you could help a system. One of the things Dad probably talked about was the fact that most of our leaders are volunteer leaders because they're all phenomenal in their jobs. They're phenomenal in the secular world. Why would we as the church not want to use those skill sets that God has given us, these people, to build with? And it's like, use those giftings, use what you learn on your 9 to 5 to better the kingdom of God. And we were meeting with a couple last night who he works for an airlines, and they have a great culture at this airlines. And so we were taking culture tips from what he had learned at work, and we were trying to find ways to implement it. And so, I think moving into this new generation of what ministry looks like everyone serving in their gifting. And don't try and do the stereotypical, this is what I feel called to do because I'm called to the ministry, so I need a microphone. Well, I'm called to the ministry, so give me a computer and let me sit in a back room so I can worship God with my computer skills. And I think ministry is a place that we are all called to. And if your gifting is not being utilized at the church, talk to your pastor. Find a way that you can take what you do well and use it for the kingdom of God, because we need each other.
Yeah, that's so good. And we've seen that bear out here in Sydney. And we had a young lady who went to university for graphic design, and she was just attending church on the Sunday, going through university for graphic design, and she's very shy. Didn't talk to me. I'm up here struggling, I'm not a designer at all, and I'm putting stuff together. And then we linked up, and now she pretty much moderates, puts out all the stuff for us. And she's taken our social accounts from like just, normal sort of size to tremendous influence. But that's because of her skill. That's because of her gifting. And she ministers every single week through our social media pages to people around the world, And that's just one little thing. And you're talking about graphics and all of that. They're very powerful, especially nowadays. It's a powerful ministry.
Yeah. And that can play over anything that, we're a church of small groups. We believe heavily in doing life together and living together and truly bearing each other's burdens, walking through good times and bad times. And perhaps if you've even got like a talent for a sport that you're at, maybe doing a small group with that sport and meeting other men that have the same talent as you and instantly having a connection because you're both good at the same thing. It's such a change in mentality of, we are all called to ministry. What giftings, what callings do you have on your life that you can turn around and find a way to win people to the Lord, to reach people that are hurting, and to grow the kingdom of God? And isn't that ultimately what we're all trying to do?
Amen. That's right. And that leads us nicely into what I wanted to talk about next, which is Motion Conference that is hosted by, or you guys run it, First Church runs it. And it has tremendous influence on not just the Pentecostal movement, but the church movement in general. I know people from all backgrounds attend that conference, and our church was able to, we were blessed to attend. I was talking to you about that earlier, online a couple years ago. I think last year, maybe the year before, but we did it online. And I was telling you, thankfully you guys finally opened up that avenue for us, because there's no way we could fly 20 people out to Houston for the conference. My mother-in-law, she was able to attend in person a few years back as well. And she was just going on and on about how great an event it is. And what I like about it is you guys don't focus just on leadership, but there's like this whole array of things that you talk about, and you could sort of see, I guess, the vision of it in what you were just talking about when you were talking about ministry. And but anyway, would you mind just sharing a little bit about Motion Conference? What is the inspiration, the vision behind it, and we'll go from there.
So Motion Conference started, I mean, ironically, as a tech conference. We started the tech side of helping churches with their sound, with their lighting, with their video, because we saw a need for it in the movement that we're part of. And so it started as that, but what we realized quickly is that we had implemented systems and processes at our church that were very appealing to people. They wanted to know about the systems and processes. So after a couple years of being primarily a tech conference, we moved it into a systems, processes, church growth, culture change types of a conference, and have seen thousands of churches come through it. And truly, the honor of our lives is pouring into people from all over the world to help them maybe shift a mindset and kind of relaunch perhaps what is a stagnant church or a church that is dwindling, and reinvigorate it and pour life into it and speak life to it. And so what we do every year at Motion, if you're interested in registering, you can go to firstchurch.com. We still have we've opened it up in kind of segments this year, because last year we sold out instantly, and it was like we didn't even get a chance to talk to it. So this year we're kind of spreading it out, the registrations. But it's a conference that we focus on the key elements of our church, which is the weekend services, having dynamic weekend services, that the only goal of a weekend service is to get people back for the next weekend service and the next weekend service, and start getting them involved in the culture and the DNA of the church. And we do that with systems to instantly get them involved. We have a 4-week curriculum that we walk through that is not going deep into doctrine. It does talk to what we believe you must do to be saved. And we talk about who we are as believers, but it's not the 3-year discipleship program that that you inevitably get in. And it's like, you can't pour punch in Sunday school until you've gone through this 3-year program, And what it is it allows us to get people on-ramped into serving, because people have a need to live for something greater. And the millennial generation is kind of the one that did that. Like, we don't want to just wear shoes. We want to wear shoes that help a child in Africa also have shoes. Or we don't want to just wear glasses. We want glasses to be sent around the world to people that need glasses. And we don't want to just buy this coffee. We want to send it. Well, that concept is called transcendence. And it's kind of been added to Maslow's hierarchy of needs as the top now. And it used to be self-actualization. And now we are into this frame where you can't explain people like Mother Teresa wanting to live for something greater. How do you explain a life like that? And you explain it through transcendence, this need for something greater. Well, starting with the millennial generation, we saw that more and more of this need to live for, I need to serve. I need to feel like I'm a part of something great. And, historically, perhaps in our movement, that has not always been the case until you lined up completely, until you had gone through our 3-year discipleship course, and until you had changed your entire wardrobe and done all of the necessary things, then maybe you could open the door to greet. Well, we don't see that as a sustainable model, because how many people have we gotten on the boat and then pushed off because they didn't understand or they didn't change quick enough for our preferences. And so what we have started doing is we do a 4-week on-ramp class that we give out at Motion. We give you the curriculum and rework it. We give you the editable documents, change it, write it however you want to. But the whole goal of it is just to get people serving and just to get them connected. Because in the book of Acts, the church did the Acts 2 says that they had all things in common and they did all things together. Well, the only way that somebody can truly get immersed in the life we live is to see the difference in you. And I think sometimes we forget that we actually have what works. and what we have changes lives. And we forget because we don't see the life change in people, and we don't reach the lowest of the low and see God just transform their lives. And so what we've started doing is picking apart the tiny little details of something that may or may not be a heaven or hell issue, but we've pushed them off the boat because they didn't agree with us on this issue. And so what we do is we get people involved instantly, and we, after they go through the 4-week class, and that's called First Steps. And so that's something we discuss heavily at Motion. And then we talk about doing small groups. So we've all done the small groups that don't work, which is, like you go to this person's house because you live in this address. And so this is your hub group. You go to their house and they're going to teach you on the book of Revelations, and you're going to deep dive, and nobody wants to teach that. Nobody is comfortable speaking to it. Nobody feels fully qualified to have these conversations, but yet that's what small groups were. And so we changed the way we do small groups. We do small groups that are interest-based. And so what I was saying about playing sports, we have a group of women that really enjoy sewing. And so we do interest-based small groups, and we say, take what you like doing, invite somebody to do it with you, and talk about God during that time. And so what we do is we have one small group is a group of women that love sewing. And so this lady has got this huge group, a lot of people that have never stepped foot in our church. And they have started sewing gowns for NICU babies. And so when a baby is born prematurely, they make these gowns for them because the hospital doesn't have gowns small enough to fit them, enough of them. So our ladies small group has started joining together with all the local hospitals. They pray over the night gowns that they make, and they go deliver them to the hospitals. And inside of it, it says, made by the women of First Church small group. We're praying for you. And then they go deliver them to all of the hospitals in the Houston area. Well, is sewing inherently spiritual? No. Is getting together and hanging out inherently spiritual? No. But is getting together with a group of women who are trying to do great things for God, who invite their neighbors, who invite their friends, who also enjoy sewing, sitting there talking about the goodness of God. Is that what discipleship is? Absolutely. And so what I'm saying by God doesn't give you a talent that you can't give back, that's a way to give back to him. And so we really implement small groups. And then we also implement the concept of others. Church is not about us. Church is not about you. Church is not about the saved. It is about the lost. And so we create a service and an environment that when lost people walk into our building, they feel the difference. We focus on explaining the things that we do and live a life that is focused on the person that is not yet saved. And it has changed the culture of who we are as a church. It has drastically changed who we are as people, because when you start seeing everybody as a soul, and everybody that you see needs God, and you start focusing on those people instead of focusing on the saved ones, watch God reach those that are lost. Watch God bring them to you and trust you with it. And so we decided to have Motion to move it from a tech conference to a systems and processes and a culture change was when we realized that when tragedy strikes, we've had 2 hurricanes at this church, we've had crazy issues at this church, and when tragedy strikes, you fall to your systems and your processes to keep the church going. And if you don't have those in place, we saw during the pandemic, a lot of churches didn't have the systems to host small groups. They didn't have small group meetings going. They didn't have a way to give online. They didn't have a way to push media out. They didn't have a way to do the things that they needed to do to sustain the church. And so what we try to do at Motion is give people the tools and the resources, and we give it all away. Like we'll share absolutely anything with you that we have, and hopefully learn from everybody else that's attending new ways to do stuff to grow the kingdom of God. And so that's Motion.
Yeah, it's a amazing conference, and obviously you would probably prefer people attend in person. just because of the networking and being able to have live questions and interact with the different stream hosts. But it's really cool, all the different streams that you guys offer and the different parts of the church and services and the way everything seems to be addressed, at least from your perspective. And again, you all are open to feedback and input. But it's a really cool conference. I love the concept of it. We're trying to do something, and not similar. But we're trying to expand our yearly conference that we have here. So it's not just about leadership per se and teaching and that sort of thing, but we can try and help churches in other areas of ministry. But
it's wonderful.
And it's great to see your perspective, the perspective of First Church. And I was wondering, there's been a lot of talk about revival the last few months with what was taking place in, was it Kentucky? Asbury?
Mm-hmm.
Is that in Kentucky?
The colleges,
Yeah. And then what was happening across America, across the world. How do you see revival taking place in the 21st century? How do you see a difference in how that's going to come about?
I think it comes about when we've seen it. A desperation sets in, and my husband preached last week. It's easy to serve a God you can't live without, and it's easy to worship a God that you can't function without. And in his sermon, he talked about how we have gotten so blessed as a people that, if God doesn't help us out, well, we've got it pretty good on our own. We can pay our bills. We can pay for food on the table. We can have nice things. And as a whole, we have moved away from believing God for the bread on our table that day, and when God becomes the source of life in our lives again, then I think we see revival in desperation. And, I would say the world we're living in is a crazy one. The agendas and the conversations are things that, who would have ever thought that making statements could just inflame an entire population. And we saw during the pandemic and in the time after it, what isolation does to the church and what it does to the mindset. And, I think the years will tell what a toll that all took on us. And I think as we are seeing, the scripture says even more so as you see the day approaching, I feel like we all feel that there's just something shifting. There's something different about it, and a desperation for more of God and more of him in our day-to-day lives is bringing about a revival that we used to hear about. The stories of people praying all night. Like, when has that happened in our lifetime? Well, it hasn't. And the desperate God, I want more of you. And as we see the rumors of war, the unrest, the civil unrest, the lies, the deceit, the craziness of just the world being the world, I think it has brought people to the point of, God, we really need you. Like, we are desperate for you. And I think it's turned so many hearts back to a God that says, you know what? Do I love unconditionally? Yes, but I call you out from the sin. I call you into covenant with me. And it's brought about this desire to go back to the way that we were all raised, and without the technology, without the craziness of the world that we're in, just God, I want a simple, deep relationship with you, and I've got to have it. And I think we're seeing it in people that are maybe not even saved yet. I think you're seeing this drawing, and I feel like that's what the book of Revelations, I feel like that's what the Bible talked about. Like, there's just this this overwhelming desire of, God, I just want to be near you. I just want in your presence because the world is crazy and I need a little bit of peace. I need a little bit of joy. I need a little bit of happiness. And we're seeing that in people. And I think it's gotten a little bit more serious with people. I
Mm,
think the agenda being pushed out in the world today has quickened the hearts of believers and past believers. Like I think
mm,
we're going to see such a return of people that may have walked away and see what's going on in the world today and are like, man, I think I'm going to get back to church. It's a
hmm.
drawing, and
Yeah.
I think that's how the last day revival starts. I think it's a desperation. It's a God, one last great awakening before you come. Give us one more.
Mm.
And I think we're seeing it. I think it's started, and it's so exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah, I concur with that. And but it's also important that in the process of that desperation that's taking place, people wanting to draw close to God, that systems are in place, that things are
Absolutely.
available for them, and that's
Yeah.
what's so great about what you guys focus on, what you focus on individually, is that we need to have these systems in place so that when they do come, that
Right.
there's somewhere for them to belong. There's
Right.
some place for them to be involved. There's
Yeah.
something for them to do, and it's not
Because you're
just an
calling them out.
emotional. Exactly.
You're calling them out from their whole life. You're
Mm,
saying, walk away from the darkness that you've been in and turn to the light. Well, okay, so we turn to the light. Do I have any friends there? Who am I going to go eat with tonight?
hmm.
Like we have to be, and that's what, again, the small groups, it's such an easy, low commitment way to get people involved in the culture and the DNA of who you are. And if you're going to if God is going to save them, then we have to love them into a relationship with Him. We have to care about them. We have to meet their felt needs. And as Tyler always says, a good sermon can't save you from loneliness. And if you're
Mm,
lonely and you don't have the church to rally with you, if we as believers stay in our little groups and don't ever reach out to people, well, then we're not going to keep them. We're going to lose them, and they're going to go back to the darkness because at least there were friends there. And so, I think that's such a good call out for the church in general, is to realize that when they come to us, they're giving up everything. They're
mm.
giving up what they do on Friday nights. If they go drinking on Friday nights, they're giving that up. What are we doing as the church body to make sure that they feel like they're still part of a family?
Yeah, that's so good. Well, this conversation could go many different ways, but I definitely wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about something that you posted recently, and this involves your full-time job, your full-time work. But you posted recently that you were meeting with the defense. Sorry, you were meeting with the Defense Department in the U.S. and some other agencies to talk about Chat GPT and how AI can help them. But I noticed that you mentioned at the bottom of that post that there are a lot of things that the church can gain from using AI. Would you mind sharing with us some examples, or actually where you see AI at right now, and some examples of how the church could use it to benefit the body?
Yeah. So, my 9 to 5 job, I am um, director of product management for federal future innovation technologies. So, the areas that I focus on are next step, horizon 2 and 3 of technologies that are out right now in the federal space. So, like ChatGPT, yes, but what does it look like in 2 or 3 years for the Marines or for the intelligence community or for the civilian agencies? And so that's where I focus on. I'm primarily focused on artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and edge computing are the three that are primarily where I'm at, which includes space systems. And so that's kind of where I live. And so what I look to is not the current use cases of artificial intelligence, because those are already there. I look to 2 to 3 years to 10 years out on quantum and AI. And so that's where I spend my days. And so it, of course, in the spirit of everything you hear, you figure out ways you can implement it into the future of the church. How can we benefit the church? How can we how can this tool be used at the church? And I opened up my questions on Instagram a few days ago for questions on AI, and somebody asked me, is AI demonic? And I'm like, well, it's not a thing, and so no, it's not. It's not like it's no, it's not. Anyway, there's so much confusion around AI, and the company I work for is very adamant about getting regulations around it and choosing trustworthy versions of it and source document, make sure data is good and quality and reliable. And so in the church world, where I see that heading is, first of all, it's a tool. It's either in the hands of good actors, it's a tool, and in the hands of bad actors, yes, it can be a weapon. But for the church, what I see as a tool that we can use is, it's like your virtual assistant. It's a, can it help you make graphics? Yes. Can it help you schedule stuff? Yes. Can it help you do research for sermons? I don't recommend it writing sermons, but can it do research for sermons? Absolutely. Can it, it's to some degree, there is a version that is available on Bing that is connected to the internet, which is Bing Chat, or then there is ChatGPT, which is not connected to the internet. So it's a source data of procured data that it's not like this. It's not where you go to get your news. So as far as what I see it as far as ChatGPT specifically, I've seen it be used in creating outlines for like staff meetings. Like if you need an agenda for a staff meeting, say, ChatGPT, I've got a 1-hour staff meeting that I'm having with my staff at the church. I would like to discuss these areas. Can you present an agenda bulletized, and it'll come out with an agenda for staff meeting, and recommendation letters. It'll write you a recommendation letter. It's going to take a lot of the clerical side out of the day-to-day. And one of the concerns I have with AI depends on the could you and should you question. Can you use it for everything? Absolutely. Should you? No. Like, can it write a sermon? Yes, it can write a sermon. Should it write your sermon? No, it shouldn't write your sermon. And so like that's the question and the framework that I utilize in my 9 to 5 as well. Like, yes, there are things it can do, but we don't want it doing those things. And so, as the church goes, I think artificial intelligence is going to be a conversation that we desperately need to have. We need to have it at all levels of our movement, because there are concerns and there are implications, but in the day-to-day use cases, I met with Kenny Jang, who is on Carrie Newhoff's team, and they had just put out an article on ChatGPT, and I reached out to him, and he and I talked about it for quite a bit. And they've actually got a Facebook group for AI for pastors and church leaders, and it's just a bunch of conversations that everybody's having about how you can use it for church use cases. And it's super cool to see what other churches are doing. So I encourage you, if you're interested in that, go find his group on Facebook and join it, because it is a very interesting conversation to be had, because there are vast use cases, vast wins that you can implement, that you can automate some processes, that you can systematize things that, who doesn't need more staff at their church, right?
Right.
This is, if it takes you an hour to sit down and write a recommendation letter, well, you can do that in 20 seconds now. And one of the cool things that I'll just tell you as far as a tip on how to use it, one of the things that we talk to at my job is we always say you need to ground it in who it is. And so you always tell it who you want it to be. So say you are a conservative pastor and you would like to write a recommendation letter for a student in your church to go to college, utilizing their skill sets and using Bible verses in the response. And they're really good at volunteering, and I'm thankful for what all they've done at our church. Well, it'll spit you out a letter that is just stunningly beautiful with scripture references and amazing amazing typography. And so what you have to realize is that it can help you with your mundane tasks. It can take away some of the annoying things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. But all of that being said, using it morally and within ethical bounds of what we feel like as believers you should use it for. It is a tool, and just like Google was a tool, just like the internet is a tool. Artificial intelligence, we've all seen the ones that go rogue, right? Like they never just stay in their box like they're supposed to. And so we always laugh about it. Like that's the mindset of artificial intelligence, is it's going to go rogue at some point. And so actually educating yourself on what it is and how it works. I've seen a lot of things talking about, well, it's just pulling its data and it's not citing it, and it doesn't show you its references. Well, in the enterprise version of it, it does. So if you get the actual OpenAI, you're getting all of that. You're not getting that on the free version that you're just typing in.
Yeah, you got to pay for it.
So I do want to relieve, there's actual source documentation behind everything it spits out. But the technology is amazing, and I think churches can use it in a lot of different ways. My concerns and Congress's concerns and the world's concerns are the ethical use of it, and getting regulations and a rules by which we all play for is the looming conversation that is happening. But I think the church can definitely benefit from it, in a sense of it can take some of the weight off of leadership to create lists or to summarize something. If there's a book you want to read and you haven't read yet, and if it's been fed into ChatGPT, you can ask it to summarize in bullet points the main concepts of something. Well, that's huge in the aspect of what we do day to day. If you haven't had time to read this new leadership book, can you give me the 6 principles, 6 bullet points from this book that I should know if I haven't read this book? And it'll spit them out for you. And so it's a great tool that will develop over time into just another thing that we do life with. People think it's new. It's not new. You've been dealing with artificial intelligence bots for a decade now. It's just it's
well,
new.
Siri, isn't Siri AI?
Right. And Siri works on Wolfram Alpha, which is more of like an indexing type of AI, which is not generative. The G in Chat GPT means generative, pre-trained transformer. Generative means it connects like a cognitive neural pathways. It actually makes neural transmitters go down paths, and it connects them just like a brain would. The people that created this model are all neurosurgeons, so they know how the brain works, and so they've kind of created an AI that does it the way the human brain does. And so it's not just indexing and yes and no. It is actually a body of knowledge that like when it first came out, it couldn't pass the bar exam. Well, within 3 months, it can now pass the bar exam. So, it's just it's generative. It is always learning, which freaks people out. So I try and just not talk about that part.
So how far before it self-actualizes? Right.
And when does it want to have transcendence, right? When does it want to do more? The conversations, Tyler had an argument with ChatGPT and it was trying to convince it that it was sentient. And so it was a very funny conversation to go back and read afterwards. But it's play with it, learn it. Don't be afraid of it, because I think, as believers, sometimes we hear stuff and we get scared of it, and so then we shy away from it and don't know anything about it. And then it's really scary, because if you don't know anything about it, you can be told anything and believe it to be true.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
There's a lot we need to learn from it, and to be aware of it, and to be involved in the space. I encourage people all the time, get in my world. I would love to have you here.
Yeah, I'm becoming a bit of an old man. I'm noticing it with this technology. I'm just like, oh, is this something that I really want to spend the time to learn? But obviously, it's something I need to. But it's just so funny. Like, this is the first time in my life where I'm like, is this a train that I want to join? I'm not sure.
I
But
know, I know. Well, you'll appreciate this. So, like, I'm the ultimate techie, and I won't let my husband put any smart devices in our house. I won't have any listening, like no Alexas, no Siri, no Roku things that listen, nothing, like no smart appliances. I'm like a Luddite in my own home, so I get it.
oh man, well that's tremendous advice, and yeah, as you said, we should learn it because it does help. I mean, I've got a couple examples in my own life where it's saved hours of time, and
Yeah,
it's definitely something like I could definitely see a small church pastor who's doing
yeah,
it part time could definitely utilize it for things that they're
oh, for sure. Yeah,
consumed with on a weekly basis. But
yeah,
I did want to touch this topic before we finish up. And again, I know I'm cognizant of your time, but as people have come to understand through this conversation, you're quite busy. You wear a lot of different hats. You're leading on high levels in your career, your ministry, but on top of all of that, which is most important, you're a mother, a wife, and so you have all these things that are going on. You're balancing a career, pastoring, but you also prioritize your family. How have you been able to do that? How are you able to accomplish so much in the same amount of time that everybody has?
um, I think it was kind of a mix of how I was raised and who I am as a person. I chose to go join the workforce. This wasn't like the church couldn't pay me, and so they kicked me out and told me go get a job. Um, I I wanted to be involved in the world. I wanted to know lost people. I wanted to know people that needed Jesus. I wanted to be out there and connecting with I wanted to be able to relate because we have a very young professional church, and I wanted to be able to be relevant in a space of what their lives are like. You know, if
Mm.
I'm asking them to come give a night of the week, am I willing to give a night of the week? You know, and so I absolutely love working a secular career. I feel like it gives me the opportunity to meet people and walk through doors that would never be open to me otherwise. And it puts me in the rooms. And I feel like God will give me the strength to do that. And so as far as how we prioritize it and how we live day to day, we live by a very rigid schedule. Generally, we know what we're doing. Like, I know every single day next week, I know exactly what we're doing morning, evening, and night. Um, we generally schedule out because our lives require it. And but we also factor into it um, my family first. And so, you know, if there is a week, we take certain nights that we don't do anything. It is family time. We aren't going to go meet with anybody. We're not going to have a small group. We're going to be home, or we're going to go do something with the family. Like tonight, for instance, was we cooked at home. The kids swam because it's swimming time already here. And my little boy played in the backyard with his bulldozer, and we just sat out there and watched him. And just a very normal evening at home. And I think people look at what we do and for so long have thought that it's not possible. But I think the way we do it is whatever happens, our family comes first. And so
Mm.
we prioritize that. And York is two. And so he comes up to the church with us most days, or we've got a little Mother's Day out program that he goes sometimes. But the mindset is Tyler and I get dressed in the morning. We get our two girls off to school, and then we bring York with us or take him to the Mother's Day out a couple days. And we work from the church. So I sit in my office at the church and work for Microsoft. And take all my calls there, and we go do lunch together. I block off time in my day for a staff meeting every week that we have with our staff every Tuesday morning. And then in the evenings, we come home, we get all the kids from school. Either we go eat, we cook, and then we do, like last night, we went over to a friend's house in the church where we talked vision. We came up with some new culture points that we want to implement at the church while all of our kids are going absolutely insane together, being together, playing together. And there was 6 adults and there were 8 kids. And so we're outnumbered at all times at our church with kids. You're limited to who you can invite by how many kids we all have.
Exactly.
So it's like culminating like, okay, how many kids does this mean? So what we do is we try to prioritize it in a way that says God's first in our lives, but then family is second, and then the church, and then my job. And what I've found is it's actually pretty doable. Church people in general are working during the day as well. And so it's not like they're coming to hang out with you up at the church or need you during the church 9 to 5 hours, because they're all working. And so our evenings are spent a lot of times with church people, but mostly in the sense of small groups. We get together, we go eat together, we do life together. And then we do carve out times that it's just our family, and we don't violate that, because they need to know that they're our priority. And I do get asked this question a lot. This is a question that every time I do Instagram questions, this question does come up. And I think the idea of having a balanced life is a joke. I don't think you ever have it balanced. I think you focus on what you need to focus on at the time you need to focus on it, and then you move to the next thing you need to focus on. So like during my work days, my kids are at school, I'm sitting in front of a computer working, and that's what's most important for that moment. I get done with my work calls, I go eat lunch with all the office crew, or we have a lot of remote workers that just come hang out up at the church, and we'll all go eat lunch together. And so I'm with church people and I'm at the church every day. I just work remote. And so it works, in the day that we live in. If you can work remote and go hang out at your church all day, then do it, And so I will say that I'm 5 years into, I worked for IBM before Microsoft. I'm 5 years into a secular career, full time, and a pretty intense one. And it's worked. I've always been afraid that it would be too much, but it's been a blessing to our family. It's been a blessing to our church, not having to take on my salary. And again, in the spirit of, if I've got this gift and I've got this talent that I can give back to God, I view it as a way of serving, if that makes sense. And so we just make it work with a very rigid schedule and a very hard, no, this is my family time. And we do it. And we pastor a phenomenal church of people that live very similar lives to us. We live in Houston. Most everybody, husband and wife, work here because of the life. It's a big city. It's expensive. You need 2 incomes, property tax. It just, people do. And so it's not as abnormal here as it may be other places. But what is abnormal is the pastoring element, because that doesn't turn off at 5 o'clock.
No, it doesn't.
It generally ramps up at 5 o'clock. And so we're very, very cognizant of our time with our family, but we do try very hard to be able to be a salt and light in the world. And it's been a blessing for us. And if I can do that and still be the pastor's wife I need to be, then why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of how we do it. Tyler and I are very rigid with our schedules and our time, and know that we'll drop anything to go be with our children if they need us. So that's bar number 1. And so it's been we do it together. We work on it together, and we've seen it work for 5 years now. So, I mean, it's doable.
Yeah. As I was putting this outline together, almost each section that we're talking about today, we could do an entire podcast on. And talking to you about time management would be awesome. Talking to you just about AI would be amazing. Talking to
We'll
you
have to
just
make
about
up
church
some more, though.
systems.
We'll do some
Yeah,
more.
maybe we'll have to do another one. But I do like to ask this to every single person who comes on. So as we're finishing up here, I like to ask this to every guest that comes on. What is it that drives you when it comes to ministry, when it comes to fulfilling the call of God in your life? What is it that is that driving force for you?
I guess if it's your driving force and you don't cry, it's not your driving force, right? We as believers forget that what we have changes lives. We don't need it anymore, and maybe we're third and fourth and fifth generation in this, and we've never seen the life change of what we have. And what drives me every single day are the people at First Church that I went to a piano recital yesterday, and at the piano recital, a little boy got up and played "How Great Thou Art," and I was weeping because that little boy's family came into church about 7 or 8 years ago. His mom was abandoned as a child and grew up, raised her and her brother by herself. Her brother killed a little boy in a gang initiation and was in prison for 17 years. And she was a drug dealer for all of her life until her daughter came to a church service and invited her mom to church. And she is now a full-time staff member at our church. And her brother greets every Sunday and holds the door open for people and is an usher. And so we say we want revival. We say we want to win the lost, but are you okay with a murderer opening the door for you on a Sunday or a drug dealer working at your church? And what drives me every day is that what we have is the truth, and what we have changes lives. And if we have never experienced seeing a life change of the drug dealer's little boy learning how to play "How Great Thou Art" on the piano, and you sit there in your bubble of isolation, of savedness, and not realize that what you have on the inside of you can revolutionize any life, any soul, any person. It can change everything about them. Jesus changes everything. And we forget. We don't know because we haven't seen it. And what drives me every day is every person I talk to, every agency I meet with, every political person I talk to, every single person that I come into contact with is going to spend eternity somewhere. And I have what they need inside of me. And I forget that people need God. I hide away in my safe little world. And Joel Urshan preached a sermon at Because of the Times this year talking about borderlands. And if there's ever been a sermon that resonated with me, it was that one, because I feel like our calling looks a little bit different than other churches. I feel like we do things a little bit different, but we're called to reach the people that maybe nobody else would reach, the people that are out in the borderlands. And it would be nice to live in community with all saved people and never have to ever encounter a murderer at your church. But what if you do? And what if you see that what you have inside of you can change their lives? And when you see it once, you never want to go back. You never want to see anything else. And so what drives Tyler, what drives me, and what drives our church is that we know that the truth that we have can revolutionize lives. And why do we keep quiet about it? Why are we ashamed? Why won't we talk about it? Why are we scared of the world that we're called to reach? And I think so many times we try so hard to protect ourselves, our kids, our families from the world that we have forgotten that you have to love the world that you're called to reach. And that's what drives us. It is an others mindset. It is, we're not focused on the saints on the pew. We're focused on the saints that are coming in the door that may not look like saints yet. And it has changed our lives. It has revolutionized who we are as people and has changed everything about us. The second that you realize that what you have on the inside that you take so for granted is what can make a murderer an usher or a drug dealer a staff member. And it's what drives us every day. It's who we are. It's First Church. It's the dynamic of our lives. And I feel like that's who we're called to be.
It's been an absolute privilege to have you on the podcast and to discuss what we talked about here today. And many of the things that you reference are going to be very impactful for people, whether it be time management, whether it be reaching out to the lost, as you were just talking about, or giving advice to people in trying to get better with their church systems, and even the AI stuff, which we could maybe have you back on to talk in depth about that. But so grateful for your time here tonight. We really are. And thank you for coming on to the podcast. I like to finish off all these conversations by giving the guests a final word. So if you wouldn't mind sharing something that you prepared for the audience as we finish off here today. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me, Greg. This has been absolutely wonderful chatting with you. And I guess in closing remarks, this is my normal, this is my life, but I feel like we as believers have an opportunity to change the world at the end of the world, right? So what I would say to anybody that is questioning whether you should get involved and be in ministry, the life that we are living and the doors that you walk through are providential. And my good friend Vonnie Lopez said, don't ever pray for the right door. Pray that God shuts all the other doors and just lets you walk through the open door. And so that's been my prayer. God lead me through the doors. And as far as starting the Motion Conference or working at First Church and serving alongside my husband, or being a family and a mom and a wife, but also into a 9-to-5 career in big tech, I think God opens those doors, and I'm never going to question the doors God opens in my life. And if I could tell anything to every single young person, or to every person questioning whether they're called to ministry or not, I would say that we are all called to minister. That's why you're saved. That's why God brought you into his family, is you have a calling on your life. And it may not be to preach on Sunday, but it may be to start a small group. It may be to give of your talents back to God, to take what you do on your 9-to-5 and find ways to bless the church with it, or start something that's never been done at your church before, or serve in a way that utilizes your perfect 10 that God has given you, because you are called. We are all called to ministry. It's not reserved for the 10 that preach on Sunday. It's for each and every one of us. And so find a way that you can get involved in ministry, whether it looks like the average, what you think of stereotypically what ministry would be, or if it's serving behind a computer, or if it's giving of your time on an evening to teach a Bible study, or to go reach lost, or to go sew blankets for nurseries at the hospital, or whatever that looks like. Find a way to give your talents back to God, because he didn't give them to you for you just to keep them and to celebrate your amazing talents. He gave those to you to give back to him, and find a way to serve them with it. So I guess my charge to each and every one of you is, find a way to be involved in the kingdom. Know that what's inside of you is life-changing, and it can change lives. It can change the hearts of the hardest person. And the people in the world around you are looking for what you have. And don't ever be ashamed of who you are, and walk through the doors that God opens, because he has called you. And the will of God is that you do the work of God wherever you are. God bless you. Thank you so much for letting me be with you tonight.